At Bitcoin at 100,000, it's still early days. I keep in mind the following. 95% of all, and I heard this stat yesterday from Bitwise, and it's very accurate. 95% of all the Bitcoin has been mined. There's only 5% left in the supply. That's very scarce. Like gold is still unlimited in its supply. Yet the US government wants to buy 5%. Institutions this year bought more than 5% of Bitcoin, and they probably want to buy 15%. MicroStrategy wants to buy 5% of Bitcoin. Another sovereign government probably will buy 5%. If you total this up, there's 40% non-retail demand for Bitcoin in the next 2 years for 5% that's available to purchase. That's why I think Bitcoin probably will have the same network value as gold, which would put it at around 1 to 1.5 million.
톰 리는 미국의 저명한 월스트리트 전략가로 현재 FS 인사이트의 공동 창업자이자 연구 책임자입니다. 그는 전통 금융권 전략가 중 최초로 비트코인에 대한 공식적인 리서치를 도입했으며 비트코인을 S&P 500과 유사한 네트워크 가치의 자산으로 평가하며 장기 보유를 권장하는 전략을 펼쳐오고 있습니다. 그의 검증된 분석력은 암호화폐 시장의 흐름을 대표하는 전략으로 쓰여지기도 하고 있죠. 이런 그가 주식시장과 비트코인 시장에 대해 전망합니다.
So now I want to look at 2026. So it's explaining where things are, and I will say, so if you are bearish still, I would urge you to think about 2026, okay? I think stocks are in better shape today than they were in February of this year. So when the market was at its old highs, I think it's actually a better risk reward now. First, we have visibility on the tariffs. So the tariff, if you didn't know what was going to happen in February, now you know what's going on with the tariffs. The second is you have to start looking at 2026. We're in the middle of 2025. The stock market always looks 6 to 12 months ahead. So you want to think about 2026 right now. And next year, we have tax cuts. We have a lot of deregulation in the pipeline, and we have more Fed cuts in 2026. Like the Fed's not cutting now, but they're going to cut next year. And companies are benefiting from freer trade. These tariff deals are allowing US companies to have better access to other markets. That's big upside. So if you ask me, I think there's a lot of earnings upside for next year. And a second thing to keep in mind is that companies are battle tested now. This is what you have to remember. We're living through history because COVID happened in 2020. And, I've been in markets for 35 years. COVID was the most improbable thing. You had to go back to 1918 to find a precedent. And there wasn't anybody alive. No portfolio manager was managing money in 1918 unless they were a time traveler. But companies survived that. Then companies survived the bullwhip supply chain effect in 2021. They didn't go bankrupt. They didn't go bankrupt in 2020. They didn't go bankrupt in 2021. Then we had the biggest inflation surge since the 70s. No company went bankrupt. And then Fed did the fastest rate cycle in history. Earnings grew. I mean, think about that. Like, we've taken the S&P through 4 huge tests at them, and they kept growing earnings. By the way, did you look at European cyclical earnings during that time? They've been terrible. Asian EM stock earnings were horrible during this 4 years. The only region that was growing earnings during that period of time was the US. And now we just threw the tariff gauntlet at them. And if you look through first quarter earnings, 79% of companies beat by an average of 8%. I mean, it's been a pretty good quarter. So I think companies survived the latest black swan, and yet investors are shockingly cautious still. And by the way, I think a new bull market did start on April 7th because we had a 20% drawdown. So the bull market post-COVID ended with 2022, and then there was a bear market, and then the 2022 bull market started in October. It ended February 18th, and we're in a new bull market. So just think of it as sentiment has completely reset. There is something that I noticed, the bull and bear busts, I noticed a lot in Bitcoin because, we as a firm, we also have been writing a lot of research on Bitcoin, and we've recommended it for 9 years now. And the idea of 2-year bull bear market cycles is a crypto thing, but somehow it's become part of the stock market too. I wonder if it has to do with instant liquidity, because I noticed that our institutional clients, they basically go to 100% cash just as quickly as an investor does now. And but as you know, that unless we're going to have a bigger drawdown than 20%, it's a mistake to go to 100% cash. Even if you think we're going to go down 20, because unless you think we're going to go down 50, then you should go to cash. But a 20% decline is pretty easy to recover from, and that's what happened this year. We've recommended a 2% allocation to Bitcoin at a minimum, but we've recently been advising closer to 5. And if you're younger, 10% I think would be fine. Bitcoin has 3 or 4 things it really follows, okay? It follows network effects. So the number of wallets and the activity per wallet still explains 87% of the price change in Bitcoin. Bitcoin still follows global liquidity, which I am shocked at, but there's a 10-week lead time. So if central banks ease, Bitcoin follows by 10 weeks. And the third is the halving, which is when the block reward gets cut in half. I don't think it's following the halving cycle as closely yet, but we'll find out. Actually, the next 3 months will determine if it's true or not. But look, if Bitcoin at 100,000, it's still early days. I keep in mind the following: 95% of all, and I heard this stat yesterday from Bitwise, and it's very accurate. 95% of all the Bitcoin has been mined. There's only 5% left in the supply. That's very scarce. Like gold is still unlimited in its supply. Yet the US government wants to buy 5%. Institutions this year bought more than 5% of Bitcoin, and they probably want to buy 15%. MicroStrategy wants to buy 5% of Bitcoin. Another sovereign government probably will buy 5%. If you total this up, there's 40% non-retail demand for Bitcoin in the next 2 years for 5% that's available to purchase. That's why I think Bitcoin probably will have the same network value as gold, which would put it at around 1 to 1.5 million per Bitcoin.
톰 리는 2024년보다 현재가 투자에 더 좋은 타이밍이라고 평가합니다. 리스트 대비 보상이 더 나아졌으며 정책 등의 불확실성이 줄었다고 진단하고 있죠. 2026년은 감세, 규제 완화, 연중 금리 인하 등이 예정되어 있어 더욱 강력한 호재가 누적될 것이며 비트코인의 희소성과 기관 수요를 고려하면 여전히 초기 단계라고 보고 있습니다. 앞으로 3개월이 중요하며 비트코인이 금과 같은 네트워크 가치를 갖게 될 경우 100만에서 150만 달러 도달할 수 있는 가능성을 전망합니다. 우리는 객관적인 시각으로 투자를 해야 하고 지금 당장만 보고 투자할 게 아니라 미래를 보고 투자를 해야겠죠. 010-2472-0429 전화번호로 탈겜이 적어서 문자 보내주시면 2025년 비트코인과 코인 시장에 대한 분석, 정보들 공유해드리겠습니다. 현재 우리에게 중요한 것은 이러한 정보를 어떻게 활용할 것인가입니다. 지금까지 영상 시청해주셔서 감사하고요. 다음에 더 좋은 영상으로 찾아뵙겠습니다. 감사합니다.